The moment my boss's younger sister wrapped her arms around me in the middle of a sunlit garden and announced that her future brother-in-law had finally arrived, every conversation around us stopped. A fork fell against a plate. Someone near the birthday cake gasped. My boss, Maren Whitlock, stood beside me with her face drained of color, gripping her handbag as though it were the only solid thing left in the world. I had only agreed to attend because she said she needed someone to drive her across town. I was supposed to stay for 10 minutes, wish her sister a happy birthday, and quietly disappear. Instead, I found myself surrounded by 30 smiling relatives who apparently believed Maren had finally brought home the man she planned to marry. What none of them knew was that she barely spoke to me outside the office, and what I did not know was that her sister's strange announcement was not a joke. It was the first crack in a secret Maren had been carrying alone for nearly 3 years. Before we continue, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet ways one human being can help another begin again. My name is Corbin Hale, and at 34, I had become very good at living a life that required almost nothing from anyone. I worked as an operations coordinator for a logistics company called Northbridge Supply, where Maren was the regional director. She had the kind of presence that made people straighten their backs when she entered a room. She was calm, precise, and almost impossible to read. She never raised her voice, never forgot a deadline, and never allowed personal problems to cross the glass doors of her office. Some employees called her cold. Others called her intimidating. I understood her differently. Cold people did not quietly pay for a warehouse worker's daughter to receive emergency dental treatment. Intimidating people did not spend lunch breaks helping new employees understand health insurance forms. Maren simply performed kindness where nobody could see it, then hid before anyone could thank her. I recognized that habit because I had spent years doing the same thing. After my father died and my engagement fell apart within the same year, I stopped believing that people stayed merely because they promised they would. Work became easier than relationships because spreadsheets did not change their minds, and delivery routes did not wake up one morning and decide they wanted a different life. That Saturday began under a bright blue sky. I had gone to the office to finish an inventory report when Maren appeared in the doorway wearing a pale green dress instead of her usual charcoal suit. For a second, I did not recognize her. Her hair, normally pinned into a severe knot, fell loosely over her shoulders. She looked younger, but also strangely uneasy. She explained that her car had refused to start and that every rental service nearby was booked. Her younger sister, Annalise, was celebrating her 29th birthday at their mother's house, and Maren needed to bring several boxes of decorations and gifts. She asked whether I could drive her. It was the first personal favor she had requested from me in 6 years. I agreed before I could overthink it. We loaded her boxes into my aging blue sedan, and she sat beside me with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Morning sunlight moved across her face as we drove through streets lined with flowering trees, yet she watched the passing houses with the expression of someone approaching a courtroom. During the drive, Maren warned me that her family could be overwhelming. She said they asked personal questions, ignored boundaries, and believed that feeding someone was the same as adopting them. I laughed, and for the first time since I had known her, she laughed too. The sound surprised both of us. It was soft and slightly breathless, as though she had forgotten how it felt to let amusement escape without permission. Then, just as quickly, the distance returned. She explained that I did not have to stay. I could drop her off, help unload the boxes, and leave. She repeated that part twice. I assumed she was protecting me from an intrusive family. I did not realize she was protecting herself from what might happen if I stayed. The Whitlock home stood at the end of a quiet street behind a white fence covered in climbing roses. The birthday celebration had been arranged entirely outdoors beneath a wide canopy. Yellow ribbons fluttered from tree branches. Long tables were covered with linen cloths and bowls of fresh fruit. Children chased bubbles across the lawn while older relatives carried lemonade and trays of food from the kitchen. It was warm, bright, and full of the kind of careless happiness that made me feel like an observer looking through glass. As soon as we stepped through the gate, a woman with copper-colored hair came hurrying toward us. She had Maren's eyes but none of Maren's restraint. Before I could introduce myself, she hugged me as though we had known each other for years and proclaimed, loudly enough for the entire garden to hear, that her future brother-in-law had finally arrived. Maren immediately pulled Anneliese aside. They exchanged urgent whispers beneath the shade of an apple tree while everyone pretended not to stare. I stood alone beside the birthday gifts, wishing I could become invisible. An older woman approached and introduced herself as Celestine, Maren and Anneliese's mother. She looked at me with a mixture of hope and caution. Instead of asking whether Anneliese had made a mistake, she thanked me for coming. Her words were gentle, but her eyes searched my face for something I could not understand. Other relatives soon surrounded me. One aunt asked how long Maren and I had been together. A cousin wanted to know whether we had chosen a wedding season. A cheerful uncle slapped my shoulder and said he had always known it would take a patient man to win Maren's trust. Each question made Maren's expression tighter. I tried to correct the misunderstanding, but she interrupted and said we should not disturb Anneliese's birthday with explanations. The authority in her voice silenced everyone, yet it could not erase the disappointment that passed across their faces. I should have left then. The situation was embarrassing, inappropriate, and clearly painful for Maren. But when I looked toward Anneliese, I saw her standing alone near the cake table with tears forming in her eyes. The excitement she had shown moments earlier had vanished. She looked less like a mischievous younger sister and more like someone who had opened a door she had been begging another person to walk through. I stayed. I helped carry chairs, repaired a string of lights that had come loose, and spent 20 minutes building a wooden toy house with Celestine's 6-year-old grandson. Maren moved through the party with practiced efficiency, cutting cake, arranging plates, and ensuring everyone had what they needed. Yet she never relaxed. Whenever our eyes met, she looked away. It became clear that my presence did not merely embarrass her. It frightened her. Late in the afternoon, while sunlight poured golden across the garden, Anneliese asked me to help retrieve extra napkins from the kitchen. Once we were inside, she apologized. She admitted that Maren had never told the family we were engaged or even dating. The truth was stranger. For nearly 2 years, Maren had spoken about me in small fragments without realizing how often she did it. She mentioned that I remembered everyone's coffee orders, that I stayed late when junior employees were overwhelmed, and that I had once driven through a storm to deliver medicine to a sick coworker. She talked about the books I read during lunch and the old watch I wore because it had belonged to my father. She had even told Anneliese that I was the only person in the office who never demanded explanations when she seemed tired. Their family had not assumed Maren and I were together because she invented a romance. They assumed it because, after years of hearing her speak about no one, they suddenly kept hearing about me. Anneliese then revealed why the announcement mattered so much. 3 years earlier, Maren had been engaged to a man named Von Mercer. The family adored him at first. He was charming in public and cruel in private. He criticized Maren's clothes, controlled her friendships, and convinced her that independence was selfish. Weeks before the wedding, Maren discovered he had been using her name to secure loans for a failing business. When she confronted him, he blamed her for not being supportive enough. She ended the engagement, paid thousands in legal fees, and never spoke about the experience again. She returned to work as though nothing had happened, but she stopped attending family gatherings and refused to let anyone close. Anneliese believed Maren was not afraid of love itself. She was afraid of becoming foolish for trusting someone again. I felt ashamed of every time I had mistaken Maren's distance for indifference. Her guardedness was not pride. It was scar tissue. I looked through the kitchen window and saw her beneath the apple tree, watching her family laugh. She was surrounded by people who loved her, yet she stood as though she had been exiled from her own life. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I did not suddenly imagine myself as her future husband. Life was not that simple, and pain was not healed by convenient romance. But I understood what Annalise had tried, clumsily and publicly, to say. She wanted her sister to stop living as though betrayal had already won. When I returned to the garden, Maren asked me to leave with her. The party had not ended, but she said she had developed a headache. Her voice was steady, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I agreed and began gathering the empty boxes. Celestine hugged her daughter goodbye without asking questions. Annalise stood near the gate, looking devastated. As Maren walked toward the car, I turned back and told Annalise that her sister would understand someday, even if today was not that day. Maren heard me. She said nothing until we were halfway across town. The sunlight was still strong as we drove beside the river. Traffic moved slowly, and cyclists passed along the path. Maren finally asked whether Annalise had told me everything. I said she had told me enough to understand why trust was difficult. Maren stared through the windshield. She said trust was not difficult, it was expensive. It cost her money, friendships, confidence, and the ability to believe her own judgment. She had promised herself she would never again place her peace in someone else's hands. I understood the promise because I had made my own version after my fiancé left. I had built a quiet life where nobody could betray me because nobody was allowed close enough. The problem was that loneliness had entered anyway. It did not break down the walls. It simply lived inside them with me. For the first time, I told Maren about the year I lost both my father and the future I thought I had. I told her how my fiancé had said she could not spend her life waiting for me to stop grieving. I did not blame her anymore, but her departure taught me to treat need as humiliation. I avoided friendships that became too personal and left family gatherings early because happiness made me aware of what was missing. I admitted that I had almost driven away from the birthday party, not because her family made me uncomfortable, but because they made me feel wanted. Maren turned toward me then. The hard expression she wore at work had disappeared. She looked tired, vulnerable, and completely human. We did not confess love. We did not transform grief into a perfect ending during one afternoon drive. Instead, Maren asked whether we could stop somewhere before returning to the office. We parked near the river and walked along the crowded promenade beneath rows of leafy trees. Families bought ice cream from vendors. Children leaned over the railing to watch boats. The ordinary brightness of the day made our conversation feel safer. Maren admitted that she had noticed me long before her family did. She noticed that I never laughed when others became emotional, that I listened without trying to solve every problem, and that I treated people with dignity even when nobody important was watching. She had wanted to ask me for coffee several times but feared changing the one relationship in her life that felt dependable. I told her I would rather risk changing something honest than preserve something distant forever. The following weeks unfolded slowly. We began with coffee after work in places where sunlight reached the tables. Then came lunch on a Sunday, a visit to a used bookstore, and another Whitlock family gathering where Annalise greeted me very carefully as Maren's colleague and possible future something. Maren laughed instead of freezing. Her family learned to stop asking about weddings, and I learned that healing could exist without being dramatic. Sometimes it looked like Maren allowing me to drive when the traffic was heavy. Sometimes it looked like me telling her when the anniversary of my father's death was approaching instead of pretending I was fine. We did not rescue each other. We practiced staying. Months later, on another bright afternoon, Annalise held a smaller birthday lunch in the same garden. The yellow ribbons returned, and sunlight once again filtered through the apple tree. This time, Maren and I arrived together because we had chosen to. We were not engaged, but we were no longer hiding behind professional titles. When Annalise approached us, she pressed her lips together, trying not to repeat her earlier mistake. Maren surprised everyone by taking my hand and telling her sister that she had been premature, but perhaps not entirely wrong. The garden erupted in laughter. I looked at Maren and saw something I had never seen during our years at the office. She was not fearless. She was afraid and happy at the same time, which I began to understand was what courage often looked like. Our relationship did not erase what Vaughn had done to her or what abandonment had done to me. There were days when Maren pulled away without explanation and days when I became silent because I expected good things to disappear. But we learned to name those moments instead of surrendering to them. Celestine once told us that second chances were rarely offered by life in perfect wrapping. Sometimes they arrived disguised as an awkward favor, a broken car, or a humiliating misunderstanding at a birthday party. The gift was not the certainty that nothing painful would happen again. The gift was discovering that fear no longer had to make every decision. If this story touched your heart, please support the video by liking, sharing, subscribing to Ancient Truth, and telling us what moment reminded you that even wounded hearts can learn to trust again. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may need hope today. Special request: comment "I still believe in second chances" if you believe kindness can reopen a heart that pain once closed. A year after that first birthday, I stood beneath the apple tree while afternoon sunlight moved across the garden. Maren's family was preparing another celebration, and Annalise was arguing with a florist near the gate. Maren walked toward me holding 2 glasses of lemonade. There was no crowd watching, no dramatic announcement, and no promise that life would always be easy. She simply placed 1 glass in my hand and leaned her head against my shoulder. For 2 people who had spent years believing that safety meant needing no one, the quiet weight of that moment felt extraordinary. Somewhere behind us, Annalise called me her future brother-in-law again. This time, Maren did not correct her. She looked up at me, smiled, and allowed the future to remain open.